Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm 𝗤𝗏𝗃. With me, as always, is Mark 𝗠𝗿𝗁. Mark, hope that intro was all right. I am mic-less today. This is a little rough.
Everyone's always complimenting your voice, so I wonder how they're going to come back after this show. The mic was your superpower.
That $50 mic was doing it for me. Now I'm screwed.
You're like a teeny bopper, like that has a totally different voice. We're just using you to market.
Wonderful. Hey, we got some good feedback on the recent some of our recent episodes here.
Yes. So, we're coming off the recording. I'm not sure how this will flow, but episode 89 with Joey and the house hack from hell. Like, I've never had so many people reach out and say how great of an episode that was. And the crazy part about that was originally when I was talking with Joey, we were just going to do like an investor story because I'm like, this is just entertaining. And his story easily turned into a full podcast. But it reminded me that we have these investor stories on our website that we have interviewed a dozen or so people that have similar downfalls or speed bumps or whatever in their real estate investing career that you guys got to check out on the website. So straightupchicagoinvestor.com. But Joey brought a lot of what people gave feedback on was Joey's perseverance and how, man, he got punched in the face and then got up and got punched in the face 4 more times and then got up. Like his story is great. Yeah,
absolutely. So if you're just finding us, or if you just didn't know about it, like check out the investor stories. They're under the resources tab on the website. It's great to hear other people's challenges because that's where you learn from. Not so, hey, I'm so great, I have all these units. It's as you mentioned, the punch in the face. Like that's what forms you. That's what shapes you. So cool. What do we got for the housing provider tip of the week here?
Well, I had another housing provider tip that I was going to say, but I was coming in here today and it's been raining all morning, and I was thinking about we have an issue on one of our properties that we own, and there's a tool in your arsenal for flooding basements. So I know for us in the south side of Chicago, flooding basements is a lot bigger problem until they put in the deep tunnel project. If you've never Googled up the Chicago Deep Tunnel Project, that's an awesome bunch of articles and pictures in itself of how they've taken all the stormwater and ran it south all the way to the Thornton Reservoir down in Thornton off 294, that big pit that everyone sees on their way to Indiana. But that's interesting itself. But so flooding in basements and backing up has been something that has actually improved in the last 10, 12 years. But a lot of investors still deal with it rains really hard, the water comes up in your basement floor, and then in the sewer pipe, and then it goes right back down. But it leaves a big mess. It stinks and so forth. So one thing that we've done in certain places that were worse than others is we've installed these backflow preventers. And think about it kind of like in a turnstile. So you walk through a turnstile in a subway, and you could go through, but you can't go backwards. And that's something that's put on your sewer drain going out to the street that allows water to go out to the city street sewer, but doesn't allow it to come back in. It's almost like a valve. It is a valve, that check valve that does not allow water back in. So if you have a basement that has this type of backup, it's usually about a $3,000 to $4,000 solution. I know it was recently when we did one, and it might depend on your setup, but this is also an option to kind of curtail something that most people don't think they can control.
I dig it. Good nuggets there, Mark.
All right, thanks.
All right, so let's jump in. We're going to talk about the permit process, zoning process, all this fun stuff. As investors, we probably say, ugh, but it's things you need to know. So today's guest, the president of Pavlovcik Architecture, registered architectural and design firm that is self-certified in the city of Chicago. They do over 100 building permits per year. Graduated from the Illinois Institute of Technology's Armour College with a master's. Has tackled a wide range of projects from master park planning to restaurant design. But the bread and butter is probably most dear to our listeners here is single family, multifamily rehab and construction. I've actually synced up with him about a year ago, and he's probably done about a dozen projects for us now and been a great asset to our operations, understands the nuances of the city and also the surrounding burbs. And some of you have probably seen this knowledge on some of his Bigger Pockets posts. So without further ado, 𝗤𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵 Pavlovcik, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom and Mark, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
I didn't butcher the last name too bad. It was close enough.
Hey, you did all right. You did all right. It was
close enough not to add it. So Samuel, first question, before we dive into the fun zoning process and all those great things,
Sure.
Why get involved in architecture? Because I see these plans and permits, man, and figuring out all these calculations, and it looks awful. Like, why did you put yourself through this?
Honestly, it was always something that I kind of enjoyed. Even as a kid, I could see that I like to kind of work with my hands. I had kind of an engineering mindset, but something kind of just drove me into architecture. I found the right school. I really enjoyed what I was doing. I mean, it's hard work and it takes a lot of time and commitment. But when you enjoy it and you love it, and it's amazing to see things actually being built and come through. It's a really fulfilling role.
Are you from Chicago, or did school bring you to Chicago?
Yeah, I am. I was born and raised in the southwest suburbs, Yorkville, which is out by kind of Aurora, Naperville area. And then school brought me downtown, and I've been downtown ever since.
And then how did you start focusing on, let's call it like the residential side, like working with the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 of the world? Like, how did you say, like, you know what, this is my niche here. This is where I'm really going to kill it.
So my first role out of college, actually the architect that I was working for had kind of a similar structure, but they worked more with a lot of developers, and it was primarily new construction. But it was pretty focused on the city of Chicago. So I did gain a lot of experience there and just kind of how the business was ran and things like that. From there, I moved on to a couple different companies, tried different types of architecture, but I really kept falling back to residential. I worked with a design and build firm for over 4 years, and that really gave me a lot of insight into the actual construction side, constructability concerns, how things come together, actually finding solutions before you get into the field as best we can, especially in remodeling. As you guys know, there's always things that come up. There's always, issues, but trying to just prevent against those as best as we can, as early as we can. That's really the best way to do it. So, I mean, my experience really kind of brought me into this world. And it's really just been what I've found that I enjoy and work well with.
All right, so let's dive into the permit process. And I know you understand the different villages, the different suburbs, but for the purpose of today's show, we're going to focus on Chicago, because that's probably the majority of our listeners, and there's too many nuances to cover every single burb here. But our listeners can absolutely reach out to you if they have anything in pretty much any of the surrounding counties. Is that correct?
Correct. Cities, villages, counties, everything. We've done work. Also, we're licensed in Indiana, Georgia, and Texas as well. So we've done stuff all the way down to Bloomington, Indiana, Bloomington, Illinois, and kind of even some further out areas. So
awesome. All right. So let's talk about the Chicago permit process. Let's start at square one, because there's easy permits, there's full plans and drawings. Can you just talk us through, give us the 2-minute rundown, and then we'll dive into the process for each one of these. But what are the different permits that you could apply for or need from the city when doing different types of rehab projects?
Sure. So the city of Chicago is unique in the fact that they do have different types of permits that you can submit for. The first one would be the easy permit process. And that one is really supposed to be dedicated only to minor remodeling and when you're replacing things like for like. So if you're just replacing some fixtures in a bathroom or a kitchen, you're not really changing anything, you're not moving any walls, you're just kind of replacement, that's the time that you can use this easy permit. Otherwise, they have the standard plan review, and that is pretty much going to be for everything else that you're going to go into. And with the standard plan review, we'll get into it a little bit. There's the opportunity for the self-certified architect, which can also assist in speeding up the process, essentially by the architect taking the liability and stating that their drawings and information is to code. So it kind of shortens what the city inputs.
When we had Prashant on earlier, I think it was episode 22 or something like that, and he talked about the self-certified. So give us a rundown for those that didn't catch that episode, or what's the difference between self-certified and not being self-certified, and are you, I guess?
Sure. So first, yes, I am. In order to become self-certified with the city actually has a list of requirements. As an architect, you have to be licensed for a minimum of 3 years. You have to maintain a certain level of insurance. You have to have completed a certain number of projects in the city. And then they have this whole very detailed 3-day training course. So that's kind of what it takes to get self-certified. But in terms of the process, for standard plan review, essentially when you submit, it gets submitted to a project manager. They distribute it to all these different departments, including zoning, architectural, ventilation, plumbing, electrical. So all of these different individual departments. Each of those departments do their own review. They might have comments and questions, which they resubmit back. Then you need to, make your adjustments, submit again, and that can go back and forth as many times as it takes until your permit gets approved. With the self-certified architects, when you submit, it goes to the same project manager. They distribute only to the zoning department. Regardless of what the project is, it could be interior, you're just building out a basement, or you're doing a kitchen remodel, still has to go to zoning for whatever reason, just for their rubber stamp and just to make sure. So it goes to the zoning department and the project manager. As soon as those two are complete, because the architect is certifying that these drawings meet Chicago code, that's all that it takes.
It's short of the time you have the license or the amount of jobs you have in your resume. Like, why would somebody not get certified? Like, I know a lot of them that are not certified, and maybe I asked them that question, but why would somebody not get it? It seems like a no-brainer if you're trying to run a successful business.
One thing is it definitely does add a component of liability to you as an architect. Obviously, now you are drawing things and you are stating that this is to code, this is safe. You don't have someone else really checking your work. So, that's a higher level of risk. It's a higher concern. So it's definitely a higher level of concern. Also, like I said, it is still a process to be able to get it done. The course isn't cheap. It costs a couple $1,000s. It's a 3-day, full day commitment to get it done. They only offer it every so many years. So you really need to kind of be on it and trying to become a part of it. It's easy to pass up. So
I guess one comment from the investor side, you also need to be careful, even if you have like the self-cert plans, you go out in the field and that architect was wrong for whatever reason, you're tearing that down, right? Like the city's still going to do the field inspections. And if you were wrong, like you are paying twice for it because you are going to take down what you did and have to do it again. So as an investor, just because it's self-cert and you got your plans approved, you better be trusting that architect because you could end up with a problem there.
Absolutely. And as we know, doing things twice is definitely going to cost you more than, even the extra time that it would have taken to get the plans through. And even with that, there's still, if you've ever seen the City of Chicago stamp of approval, it says, that it's a contingent approval. It's not 100%. We're certifying everything. They still have the opportunity to bring things up in the field and say, no, this needs to, meet or exceed the code or bring things up to change.
Yeah, you're approved to move forward. That's all it is.
Right.
So that saves some considerable amount of time possibly for investors. Is there, and you don't have to answer to your practice, but just in general, do self-certified architects tend to charge a premium just because they could get the job done faster and kind of streamline the investor's job?
I believe so. From what I've seen, yeah, they'll tend to charge at least a little bit more. I don't know exactly how much more. The thing with architect fees is it can range and vary so significantly between just different firms in general. But a lot of that also has to deal with what you're actually getting for your money. We prioritize on, our accuracy, our constructability concerns, meeting code, and getting you your permit, where there are firms that are out there that will get fully into all of the interior design aspects. They'll help, choose all the materials. They'll work everything out for you. So it's a different level of service that they're providing, and that can make a big difference in the cost as well.
I always tell people, before I heard about the self-certified with Prashant, he taught me that a couple years ago. I always tell people never go with the lowest rate when it comes to an architect. You got to make sure, because sometimes the lower rate takes a year, and the guy that's going to charge you 20% more will get you done in 6 weeks. Like that is not something you commoditize. So investors out there, never always be aware of the cheapest price, I guess.
And that's true, and that's true in a lot of things, right? It's you get what you pay for. So,
oh man, so what does that say about our free podcast? All right, so Samuel, let's take a step back. I want to walk through this process. So let's say I bought a building. I bought a 4-unit. I'm going to do some remodel to it. I'm doing kitchens, baths. I'm knocking down a wall. I guess, can you give us the workflow of easy permit versus full plans and drawings? You mentioned it. You alluded to it, but can you give us, these are some things that automatically push you to full plans and permits?
Sure. So when you said knocking down a wall, that
Yep.
pretty much triggers immediately, yes, you are going to need full plans and permits. One of the differences with the 𝗖𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵 permit is the fact that you actually don't need architectural plans. You don't actually submit anything to the city except for the permit paperwork and contractor license and things like that. So with the 𝗖𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵 permit, actually, you can do it yourself as a homeowner. You can do it as a general contractor, whereas any of the full standard plan reviews, the city only allows for an architect, a structural engineer, or an expediter to submit and process the permit.
Yep. So let's say we're doing something. We reach out to you to say, hey, do I need full plans and permits? Yes, because of reason X, Y, or Z. Walk us through the actual process. Like as an investor, what am I responsible for? What is the GC responsible for? As the architect, what are you providing? Just like talk through that like at a very tactical level.
Sure. So for the standard plan review or self-cert process, which is part of standard plan review, you will essentially need to submit full stamped architectural drawings, which show the scope of work. In addition to that, the city actually requires you to provide existing conditions drawings of the entire building. So if this is a 2-unit or a 3-unit or even a single family, and all you're doing is a bathroom and kitchen remodel on one floor, they still want to see rough plans of the entire building when you do submit. So that's a little bit unique with the city of Chicago. There is quite a few documents and papers that we need signed by the owner, signed by the contractor. We'll need contractor information. Depending on the scope of the work, you'll likely need a licensed general contractor, a licensed plumber, and a licensed electrician. They each have their own documents that they'll need to sign. You'll need their license information. And then as the owner, there's quite a few documents that the city wants you to sign and kind of sign away your liability and everything.
Yep. So when do I engage the architect? Like when can I start? If I got to get existing, when can I engage the architect? What does the architect just say? All right, hey, I want this to be a 4-bed, 2-bath or whatever it is, and run full range on it. Like just talk through some of that collaboration.
So when you engage the architect is really, it can be kind of flexible. It's really up to you. Some investors like to wait until they close on the property because then everything's secure. One thing that's always an issue is, well, hey, can I do this? And I want to get drawings put together so I can figure out how much this remodel is going to cost. But in order to figure out how much it's going to cost, you need to provide the drawings before the GC will actually give you an estimate. So it's kind of this back and forth that can be a little bit difficult. But the more detailed the drawings are, the better your estimates will tend to be. So if you wait until you close on the property, the architect's going to come out. They should measure for the existing conditions. We'll get accurate measurements. We'll build up the existing model. We'll discuss kind of the scope of work and say, okay, what do you want to do with the property? We'll figure out, what we can do. There's obviously some limitations. We'll bring up any kind of concerns that we might have, like, hey, you're looking to add 2 or 3 bathrooms to this property, and your water line's going to end up needing to be increased, or kind of big concerns like that you might not have thought of ahead of time that can really lead to some bigger costs. Some clients also will prefer to get us in as early as possible. So like you guys, a lot of times, even before you close on the property, you're like, hey, let's get started on this. Let's get you guys out there. As long as we coordinate, get a few hours on site, we can start rolling with everything. And then obviously our goal is to have everything as close and ready, closest to your closing date as possible, just to minimize that downtime if we can.
Yeah, no, so I'm a big proponent of that, right? Like we close on a property and can submit plans the next day because we take care of everything during that closing period. The gotcha is things fall out, right? Right. And I'm paying you and just the lack of time, like that's like the risk you run, but it's to save you that amount of holding cost. That's like the risk reward factor there.
But if you get jammed or a deal falls apart, like every 10 deals or whatever, you take that cost and average it across the 9 that successfully went through, like that's just kind of cost of doing business. And you could, that's how I justify those type of things.
100%. Absolutely. I'll take it all day long.
Yep.
right?
And that's also a good conversation to have with your architect ahead of time, just so that way you're on the same page, right? It's all about communication. So, I mean, yes, we'll charge for the services that we provided, but if we didn't have everything 100% done, you're not going to pay the full, 100% of your contract kind of thing.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So we mentioned the self-cert. What are some of the other variables? Because you hear like, oh, I got my permit done in 2 weeks. Oh my God, I've been waiting 6 months for a permit. Like, can you talk through just some of those variables? Like one of them, I had to deal with an administrative adjustment. It was terrible. Like it was just ungodly awful. Like, can you just talk through some of those, like, gotcha is probably the wrong word, but what are some things that would expand that timeline compared to more of a clean deal?
Right. So the first thing that can really expand the timeline is how busy the city is or any issues that the city might be having. Right now, recently, we've been seeing the zoning department be really backed up. So if we're doing an interior remodel, and really the only thing zoning needs to do is rubber stamp it because it has nothing to do with the outside of the building, it still has to cross their desk. And if that's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to do because the zoning department's that backed up, it's still going to be a long permit timeline. The city does have an option to pay them an additional $1,500 fee for which you can do an in-person zoning review, and that will get it done typically within about a week or so. So that will definitely speed things up. But there's been other times where the zoning department will get their review done in 2 or 3 days. Last year, we ran into the issue with the city where as part of the self-cert process, you need to process a debt check where you submit information to the city and make sure that the owners and yourself as the architect don't owe any debts to the city. That could be a water bill, a parking ticket, anything. They'll make sure they'll get their money. And so those debt checks were taking 3-4 weeks, whereas a lot of times it was usually only like 2 or 3 days. So that started to be something. As soon as I saw those timelines getting extended out, as soon as we would sign a deal, I would submit for that debt check, just so that way that might have been the last thing that we were waiting on before we even got to submit. So one thing that definitely comes up is just how busy the city of Chicago is or any issues that they have. The other one that you had mentioned, Tom, was the administrative adjustment. So that can actually deal with zoning issues or zoning concerns. The administrative adjustment's a lot easier process than a actual zoning change, but it does still have a 15-day hold period that you'll have to have regardless. I had a client where they owned both properties on either side of their project, and they said, "Hey, I'm only notifying myself. Can we skip this 15-day hold?" And they said no, because you're still notifying.
Sending certified mail to yourself, right? Like
right. And you're also notifying the alderman. That's the other one.
Okay. So I guess zoning's a big one right now. You mentioned it. Let's go there. So I guess I want to get into the ADU and all the cool things that are happening. But before going there, can you walk us through just the zoning categories in the city? And I know you also have a cheat sheet that we'll link to on our resources tab that'll really help help our listeners understand. But talk through, like, if someone who's never gone through the zoning categories, like, what does it mean to be R2, R3, et cetera?
Sure. So the zoning ordinances basically will tell you what you can or cannot do essentially by right, is what they'll call it. So if you have a lot and it's vacant and you say, "Hey, I want to build a 3-unit building on here," depending on your zoning, you might be stuck with only a single family, or you might be able to build a 4 or 5-unit building, just depending on that zoning designation. So the zoning will tell you what your setbacks are from your side property lines, from your front, from your rear. It will tell you your FAR, which is your floor area ratio, which is how much square footage you can actually build. And it will tell you how many units you can build, which is a coordination of the area square footage of the lot that you have.
Okay. So I guess can we walk through like an actual tangible example here? So let's say
Sure.
I have a 2-unit with the, non-conforming garden. I want to make it a legal 3. It's zoned R3, and I'm on a standard, or let's call it like I'm on a 30 by 125 lot, right? Because the lot size plays a big factor in this, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right. It does. So if you have a non-conforming unit, in order to get that as a legal third unit, you would have to actually meet the zoning requirement for your lot area. If you're R3, you actually are only allowed one unit for every 2,500 square feet of lot area. So that means you would have to have a 7,500 square foot lot before you could actually legally get 3 units. Otherwise, you're looking at a zoning change. So that would be the first killer pretty much right there.
So if that was an empty lot, I couldn't even build a 2 unit, right?
So, right. So if it was a empty lot, you said it was what, 30 by 125. So that's 3,750. So yeah, you would need 5,000 at a minimum to build a 2 unit on R3. With that, sometimes the code does have these little exceptions and these little adjustments. R3 is actually a unique one when it comes to 2 unit buildings. If you can prove that the neighboring buildings on the same side of the block from street to street, that more than 60% of them are multi-unit buildings, then there's actually an exception that you can pursue to essentially allow you to build a 2 unit building. It doesn't matter how many units the other ones are, as long as they're multi-unit, you can get 2 units, no more. So
I get a question, maybe take a step back here and explain, because I get this question all the time. You know, people will come to me like, oh, it's R3, like I could build a 3 flat. Like, how many different zoning is there for residential? And confirm that has nothing to do with the number after the R, has nothing to do with the amount of units.
Right. So there's actually about 10 different residential zoning designations. And the kind of cheat sheet that I provided, you'll kind of see everything on there. Some of them, they are called, like half steps between. So there's R3 or RS3, and then there's RT 3.5. It really doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the number of units that they allow. Again, it's really based on how many units you're allowed per the area of your lots. And then also how much area you can build per the area of your lot.
Is there a parking rule of thumb when it comes to units on a lot?
Yeah. Yep. Typically you want to look for 1 parking space per unit. And a minimum size is going to be 8 feet in width, which is usually your restriction.
So let's play with this example still. So by right, I can't make the third. I can't add that 3rd unit, right? We go through, I don't have enough square footage. Do I have other options? Like what else can I potentially do?
At that point, your only other options are, which I don't want to get into it too far, but the city did start the ADU pilot program, which if you happen to be within one of the ADU pilot areas, there is a new process that you can pursue to add an additional dwelling unit. With this ADU program, it has some special features and things to try to make it a little bit easier for this to happen. So you actually wouldn't need to provide a 3rd parking space. There's a few other things, but it's definitely its own and very new process, and they're still really kind of ironing things out. If you're not within one of the ADU pilot areas, then the only thing you really could do would be to do a zoning change.
Okay. And if you wanted to get really aggressive, I know this is the complete pain in the butt process, but just so it's out there and we can explain it, talk through like alderman meetings, all that fun stuff. Like if you really wanted a zoning change and felt strongly about it, what punishment are you signing yourself up for?
Oh, I mean, I get knots in my stomach thinking about it, man.
If you really wanted to get a zoning change, the first thing that I always recommend is speaking.
Make a campaign contribution. I didn't know. Sorry.
Very close. Speak to a zoning attorney. You will need to hire a zoning attorney. So you'll speak to a zoning attorney. We've got a couple recommendations for guys that we work with. And I've seen a lot of investors tend to work with the same kind of people. They know what they're doing and they know how to go through. But what's nice is you can talk to them and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. What opportunities do you have? Do you think you might have an estimate for the likelihood. Also, yeah, definitely, get your alderman on board, talk to them, become their friend, get their support. That can really help. Also be concerned of any community groups that your property might be located in. If you can get their support, that's a great thing. If you don't have support, that can really be a hard shutdown right there. But say you go through everything, you say, okay, yeah, I want to go forward with this. I mean, just know it's going to be a pretty long and daunting process. You'll need to have, full architectural plans that you are basically submitting as part of the zoning process. They can be a little less detailed than your actual construction drawings, but you'll still need architectural plans. You'll need to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing process, which they meet, once a month, and depending on how full their docket is, you might not even get onto the meeting for another 3 months just to even be heard. So I mean, it's easily a 4-6 month process, maybe even longer. So
with no guarantee of you coming out on top.
Absolutely, with no guarantee, you can pay for all this. You could go through the whole thing, and they still say no.
For the attorney alone, I know the 7 to 10 grand was kind of like the cost for that part that we experienced. Then the other thing where it's a pitfall or gotcha that I messed up on is got it all approved and got the permits. And then I went through a split with my partner, and time passed, and we went to go do the work, and they said it's no longer valid because you didn't do the work in a certain amount of time. I know you're laughing over there, Samuel, but so that was a kick. That was a kick in the there. So, but that was a big mistake. So make sure if you're going to go through the process, be committed to it and see it all the way through, including the permits and rehab and all that stuff, because it's not the whole process all runs together, and you don't get to just start over certain parts of it.
Yep. And I want to touch on ADU, but before doing that, so this is, I guess, so everyone's aware, like if you get something zoned, talk about something that's zoned like R5 then. Like, why is that a big benefit to an investor compared to a 2, 3, et cetera? Like, what is because like the one you did for us a few months back, we were able to get a 3 unit to a 4, and it's beautiful. It's great.
Right. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the residential zones are actually going to be RS2 or RS3. Basically, for those two, you're allowed 1 unit for every 5,000 square feet for RS2 and 2,500 square feet for RS3. Whereas if you jump up to RM4.5 or RM5, for RM4.5, you get 1 unit for every 700 square feet of lot area is what you'd be allowed by right. RM5, it's down to 400 square feet of lot area. So that already you can have a much smaller lot and be able to add a lot more units. With that, the size of the building will also make a big difference, especially if you're looking to do an addition, whether it's up or out the back or something like that, or obviously for new construction. But you will still be limited to your FAR requirements, even if your building is already existing and it already exceeds the 0.65 FAR that's allowed by RS2. You won't be allowed to do that addition by right. So you would need to likely pursue an administrative adjustment to try to get additional FAR, or it might be, an even longer process through zoning to try to get something like that approved. Whereas if you're at RM5, you can actually have 2 times the lot area for your floor area ratio. So obviously that means you're going up with it as many stories, for RM5, you can actually get up to 45 feet in height versus the 30 feet that you'd get with R2 or R3. So all of these things definitely provide more opportunities.
FAR, floor area ratio. Do the equation for us. Do the equation for everybody out there. I'm not even going to try.
The simplest terms here.
Simplest terms. So your standard Chicago lot is 25 feet wide by 125 feet long. So that would be 3,125 square feet. If you have a RS3 lot, that gives you 0.9 for your FAR. So you take that 3,125, multiply by 0.9, and that gives you 3,124 square feet that you can essentially build on that lot. So
does that include garage spaces? Does that include unfinished basements? What are some of the...
So that is specifically for the primary building. So it does not count the garage. And if you notice in the city of Chicago, we have a lot of buildings where the first floor is raised up above the street level. There's a lot fewer buildings in terms of strictly residential where you walk in straight at grade. And that's actually because the city of Chicago says that if a basement level is more than 50% below grade, it doesn't count towards your floor area ratio. So if you're 4'1" below grade and 4'0.5" above grade from your floor to the ceiling in your basement level, that does not count towards your floor area ratio.
Huh, that's awesome. Welcome to garden apartment. All right.
Right? Exactly. And then for the garage as well, there's essentially, depending on the width of the lot, essentially for residential, if you have a lot that's 25 feet or less, you're allowed a maximum of 480 square feet. If you have a lot greater than 25 feet in width, then you're actually allowed 60% of your rear yard. So there's a calculation for the rear yard space as well.
Yeah. So I guess tying that all together, because we started with R5, you only need the 450 square feet or whatever. You have a standard lot. It's 3,100 something square feet. In your head, you're like, oh, I can build a 6-unit here because I only need, whatever. But that would never happen because you'd run into the FAR requirements. Like you can only build so much square foot on that lot, unless you wanted to build some like really tiny, crappy units. But.
Right. And some people do, you can. But the other side with that too is that's when you also start to get into having some concerns with the building department, because now this is actually one of the newer implementations with the latest Chicago code is if you have 4 or more residential units that you're building, they are now requiring residential fire sprinklers. So be prepared to add that into your budget for the sprinkler system for the building, as well as, the water line for the supply for that.
Yeah. Big cost there.
Is there don't mean to put you on the spot. Is there a cost per square foot when it comes to putting sprinklers in for residential? I know we know that for the commercial side, but
I would have no idea. I'm sorry.
All right.
All right. So we just touched on ADU, but I want to dive in there a little bit. So I guess the purpose of the ADU is to make more affordable units, right? Affordable dwelling units. Mm-hmm. Out of the process that you laid out earlier, what part of that are you skipping? If you're in one of the pilot zones, and we can put the map to the pilot zone, we can map to it. But how is it making it easier for me as an investor? Like what part of that process am I skipping? What is that actual advantage?
So essentially with the ADU, it's a calculation based on the number of units that you already have in the building. Will actually tell you how many units you can add. And an ADU can be a basement garden unit, it could be a attic unit, or it can even be a coach house in some cases. So essentially what that allows for is, say you have a RS3 lot where right now you're stuck with a single family residence, and you want to add an extra dwelling unit. If you're in that pilot area, you can add that second dwelling unit without needing to go through the actual zoning change or full variation process.
So you don't have to go through that zoning change that, 6 months or whatever that number is, but like, what do you have to still do? Like you don't just automatically get it. Like, what is the process?
Right. So with that, this is why I didn't want to speak to it too detailed. That will probably be, maybe even a whole other podcast for you. But at this point, I've got quite a few clients that have been interested in it, but no one to actually pull the trigger yet. So I haven't personally gone through that full process yet. So I'm really waiting to see exactly how everything lays out, because the one thing that I do know is with how new it is, they're kind of using this time to say, okay, this is what people are submitting, this is what people are looking for, and kind of adjusting what their requirements are based on this information. I remember it seeing go through first and mentioning that ADUs can actually be part of the self-cert program, which I thought was really strange, because if you have a 3-unit building and you're adding a unit, even if it's by right, because you're adding a residential unit, it no longer qualifies for self-cert. So then you do actually have to go through the standard plan review. So the self-cert has restrictions as to what types of projects you can do. And with the ADU, they said originally, oh yeah, you can do it self-cert. And then now they've kind of backed that out and changed it and said, oh, no, you can't. So there's still some things that are being adjusted and kind of going through. But from my understanding, you're still going to go through your standard plan review process. There's definitely going to be some, additional paperwork. I'm sure the city will have some additional fees and likely some notifications to neighbors and such.
It's crazy. I mean, the biggest thing I see with this is if you're buying a building that has a non-conforming basement, right? You're buying it. They already have the tenant in there. You're part of the ADU pilot. Like, they're probably going to make you rip open the walls, right? You're going through the whole permit process. Like, even if it's already finished and so forth, like, you're probably starting square one or close to it, and it's not really defined by the city yet. I guess it's
right.
Ambiguous. You don't know if you're starting at square one. You know they're going to do something. You don't know how bad it's going to be.
Right. And with that, if the city says, hey, that unit was not done legally, we don't have a building permit on record for adding that unit, they can truly make you rip everything out because they have no verification that anything was ever inspected. They have no way of knowing that anything was done by, a licensed plumber or by a licensed electrician, or that any of that work meets code. So, I mean, they can have you open up the walls so they can see it, but they might say that that's still not enough because it wasn't done by a licensed professional. Even if it looks like it's the code, we're still going to make you rip it all out. They can literally go as far as they want to with it.
Ooh, again, knots in the stomach. Been there too many times, I guess. Yeah, for me, it was always the inspections that I thought were going to go south that never did, and the ones that I thought would be slam dunk 40 grand later. So, hey, before we wrap here, I want to, I opened up Bigger Pockets this morning and I saw comments. I think Henry started this, and I saw Tom, you commented, 𝗫𝗏 commented. I'm not sure if you did, Samuel. There's kind of talk or suspicion that zoning is kind of being a little more conservative on or reissuing smaller numbers than what was on a recent water cert. Anything you can speak to that, or Tom, did I say that right?
Yeah, on the zoning cert at closing.
Yeah. I did see that post. Actually, I didn't get a chance to comment on it yet. One thing that I have seen recently is that I had a client, similar situation, where they had an old cert saying that it was 3 units, and now it's coming back as 2, but it was coming back as 2 residential units on the upper floors and a commercial unit on the ground floor. So sometimes they're saying, oh, well, it wasn't, designated whether it was residential or commercial then, but now we're clarifying that it's only commercial. It's not a residential unit, even though it's clearly built out as a residential unit. Same thing. If there's no permit showing that was done, according to code or with inspections and everything, they can make them rip it out completely. Gotcha.
Okay. That's good. We'll have to stay on top of that topic and see what else comes from that.
Just always in your attorney review, like, this is contingent on the updated zoning cert showing this number that I need.
Yeah.
Right? Like, give yourself that out.
Yeah. That was your advice, I think, on Bigger Pockets. That's awesome feedback right there. So, all right, go to the wrap up here. You ready, Samuel? I don't know if you've rehearsed these questions or not, but we can usually tell by how fast you answer. So
no, I've not.
No pressure.
All right, no pressure. Okay, cool. So you're well respected, and Tom thinks highly of you. You're out there as an expert. How have you been so successful in your field? What's your competitive advantage as an architect in Chicago?
I think my competitive advantage is really just my level of communication and the quality of service that I provide. We really try to think things through for you. Your concerns are our concerns. We're trying to watch out for you, and we're also trying to be realistic. And we understand, different costs can have a huge impact on the actual profitability of the project. Holding costs can have a huge impact on the profitability of the project. And we want your success because your success is our success.
Rehearsed. Good answer, but rehearsed.
He knows. I'll give my 30-second plug here, but with anyone in your network, when they can proactively, when they're not a yes man, when they can proactively say, wait, by the way, did you think of this? Like that is very valuable. Like two examples where we were going to do that 3-unit duplex down. It's like, no, Tom, it's R5, make it a 4-unit. And then when we're having troubles with zoning, saying, hey, if you want, you can, I never knew about the in-person. Like you can make this go away by paying $1,500. And when your holding costs are on these, you know, 1 point whatever $1 million deals are $8,000 a month, like, yes, make it go away. I will pay whatever.
Right.
So I guess just architect, lender, insurance, whoever, like when they're going out of their way and proactively helping.
Yep.
So
Trusted advisors.
There you go. All right. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
I would say.
He's pretending it's not rehearsed.
No, I told you none of these are rehearsed. One piece of advice. I mean, I guess really get the inspection, because I have seen some very unique things in some of these buildings, and you really can't protect against everything. But I mean, I've seen a lot of things found during home inspections that can, you know, save a lot of money or just bring up concerns that really, you know, help you out.
Gotcha. Yep, for sure. And then when you see red flags on the inspection, keep running with it. Make sure you see it through. So, all right, Samuel, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I enjoy my motorcycle. I have a Ducati 1199, so I'm part of a Ducati club here. We're actually going down to Austin for the MotoGP race in about a week's time. In the winter, I'll do snowboarding and going out downtown. We love our restaurants. We love our nightlife here. So
nice.
What is a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners?
This podcast, obviously. No, but I think one of the best books that I read, which when I say read, I mean audiobook, because I was commuting for a while and that was the best use of my time. But I think How to Make Friends and Influence People, that was a great book that, again, it just teaches you a lot about communication and how to work with people, and understand that when you provide them benefit, that's what sets you above everyone else. Instead of just doing the service you're there for, when you're thinking from their perspective, or you're, you know, trying to find ways to benefit them more than they were expecting, that's what keeps them coming back, and that's what can really set you apart from others.
Love it.
Yeah, good. Carnegie's so good. Another good one too, like especially from COVID, from him was How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Like of the same mindset of that one, but like it's just man, it's timeless, and it's just such good advice.
Nice. All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network that you would highly recommend to other investors here in Chicago.
Let's see.
Oh, he only rehearsed the first like 2 or 3.
I mean, I've tried asking if you guys do any actual GC work, but I know that's been, you know, hit or miss sometimes too. But I mean, you guys have obviously been great to work with. I mean, honestly, and I don't know if they're really in the investor network, but 𝗦𝘁𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗃 is one of the zoning attorneys that I've worked with quite a bit, and he's been phenomenal on every project that we've done thus far. So, I mean, if you're looking for a recommendation, I would definitely throw his name out there.
That's huge. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Samuel, thank you so much. You've provided a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? And is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my contact info, I'm hoping you guys will be sharing in some way. But you can look us up online. I've shortened our website because I know my last name is a little wild. So it's just pav-arc.com. So that's P as in Peter, A, V as in Victor, and then a dash arch.com. Some of our work samples are on there, our contact information, everything is on there. I'm always happy to have a discussion on a project. I'm happy to actually look into your project a little bit for you and kind of help you out with understanding, you know, how this zoning things work, any construction concerns that you might have. I'm all about, you know, accepting costs of opportunity, and again, just helping fellow investors improve themselves and hopefully pay it forward to help other people learn as well.
Good stuff. Good ending. All right, Mark, we made it through. No mic, fighting a little cold. I think we'll be all right here.
Well, hopefully no one gives us any bad reviews, so we'll see.
Just get a bunch of bad reviews of the sound quality. Jemmy, we're blaming you for that. All right, so hey, this is a good one. So we'll link to this for the Chicago housing fact here. I think you can get this one, Mark. So there's housingstudies.org breaks down annually how many single families, condos, 2 to 4 units, 5+ units there are in each Chicago neighborhood. It's an actually really interesting study I dove into.
Wow.
So we'll post to it because it could actually be used as an asset. But for today's question, in 2020, from that same study, 2 to 4 unit buildings made up what % of Chicago's housing stock? And housing stock is single family, condos, 2 to 4s, and 5+. Like those are the 4 categories. Was it A, 17%, B, 16%, C, 25%, or D, 37%?
Percentage of units or percentage of buildings?
Percent of the housing stock.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the building, not the people.
give me the percentage one more time. Sorry, I was focused on
7, 16, 25, 37.
I would probably go with 25.
Samuel, you want to take a guess?
He knows.
He knows.
Well, because Mark went with 25, I'll actually go with 37.
25. Mark, first off, nice work.
Nice.
And that's a lot, man. That's a lot of 2 to 4 units.
That is a lot. And I think John Kasman on his episode shared the fact he knew that we have the largest 2 to 4 housing stock anywhere in the country.
And there's some neighborhoods like South Lawndale, it's 71% of the housing stock. Brighton Park, it's like 70%. Like some of these neighborhoods, that's what it is.
I got to check out that site. You haven't shared that with me yet. So, all right. Awesome. Samuel, awesome show. Tom, awesome show, despite our mechanical issues here. But listeners, if you have any investor stories, so we brought up early on in the show about investor stories. If you know anyone that's got a story that is rough or had a rough road doing a project, this could be a potential episode. It could be a potential investor story. Share it with us. Other people want to hear your story. And sometimes for therapy reasons, it's good to put your story out there to help you kind of move on and move past things. So give us a 5-star review and we will see you soon. Thanks, Samuel. Thanks, Tom.
Awesome. Thanks all.
Thank you, Mark and Tom. Take care, man.